So far, we're on an extremely dangerous path. There's a move, and it may come to a head in a matter of days, not months, but days. We thought it was going to get a lot worse, and it didn't, so buy stocks. That's psychology of Wall Street. 6 to 12 weeks, maybe a few months. So here's what happened. Iran had fired, different estimates, but 200 or more drone missiles, but also cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. These two countries basically hate each other, and that goes back a long way. But they've never actually directly attacked each other. Israel has never fired a missile at Iran. Until Saturday, Iran had never fired any missiles at Israel. They operate through proxies. The proxies could be Hamas, Hezbollah, the Syrians, the Iraqis, Houthis in Yemen. The Israelis have their commander teams. They get basically spies in Iran who tip them off. So a lot of going back and forth, but they had not directly attacked each other until Saturday. So far, we're on an extremely dangerous path. Number one, we're escalating. You kill 3 generals, we're going to just fire 200 missiles at you in your territory. So there is an escalatory dynamic to it. Israel has nuclear reactors and Israel has nuclear weapons. They've never publicly admitted it, but no one doubts that they have a fairly large stockpile of nuclear weapons. Iran has nuclear reactors. They have ballistic missiles. At least so far, they don't have a nuclear weapon, but estimates are there may be only 6 to 12 weeks, maybe a few months at most, to be able to actually test a nuclear device and then over time turn that into a weapon. They definitely have highly enriched uranium. Uranium that kind of comes out of the ground or is light under 20%. You might need 20% for a nuclear reactor, but for a weapon, it has to be enriched to 90% plus or 95%. They haven't taken that final step to detonating a nuclear device, but they're not that far away. So one, full-scale nuclear power, another power that's just, as I say, maybe a couple months away from having nuclear weapons if they want them, both with nuclear reactors, which are different than weapons, except if you blow them up, they can melt down. You're back to a Chernobyl-type scenario, so extremely dangerous. We don't do conspiracy theories. We don't guess. We either know exactly what we're talking about or we use reasonable inference. We're always grounded in the facts, even if the facts are pretty startling in and of themselves. But here's what appears to have happened. I have this from several different sources in the Middle East, in Europe, and to some extent the United States. And you got to put everything in the context of the fact that this is an election year in the United States. And I can tell you that the people at the White House care more about the election than they do about war and peace. That's too bad. That's sad. You should always put national policy and the national security of the United States ahead of your election considerations, but that's not what they do. So they're thinking about how's this going to play out in terms of the election. So what the United States did is we basically called up Iran, operating through intermediaries. The information I have is the intermediary was Oman, which is, of course, on the right across the Straits of Hormuz from Iran, physically very close to Iran, but they also have a good dialogue with them, even though they're Arab. The Iranians are Persian, but they talk. So the U.S. operating through Oman said to Iran, hey, we know you're going to strike back. Everybody gets that. We know you probably have to. You can't just let this assassination of these generals go. But why don't you do something that the Israelis can defend against, number one, and give us a heads up, let us know about when and what, and then go ahead and fire your missiles. But if we know what they are and when they're coming, Israel can fend them off and you'll be able to satisfy your own people. Hey, we struck back, but not actually kind of go further down the path towards World War III. And the Iranians agreed to that. Now you say, well, wait a second. Why on earth would the Iranians listen to Joe Biden on a proposal like this? The answer is, don't forget, Biden has given the Iranians tens of billions of dollars. He's released funds that were frozen. And most importantly, he took off the oil sanctions. Iran was subject to very severe sanctions on the export of oil. Biden removed those sanctions. So now Iran is making tens of billions of dollars more by exporting oil without fear of U.S. sanctions. And of course, the price of oil is up to Brent crude, which is the European Middle East price, is about $92 a barrel. It's not 60 where it was not that long ago. So Iran has probably 20 billion reasons to work with Joe Biden, and that would be $20 billion that he's given them, either in releasing assets or taking away the sanctions. And by the way, this goes all the way back to the Obama administration. Remember Obama landed a plane in Tehran and they dumped off, I think, about $20 billion of cash and gold. They had to call the Netherlands Central Bank to print up a bunch of euros, 500 euro notes at the time, 200 euro notes also, and gold. So we've been doing everything possible to help Iran. So Iran would have listened to that, okay, it's a deal. Then the U.S. calls Israel and says, look, they're attacking you, probably knew when, but you have what's called the Iron Dome. You have anti-ballistic missiles, and those missiles that shoot down missiles will help out with radar and intelligence, and they'll aim at the desert. They're not going to aim for Tel Aviv, and they didn't. So now sort of everybody's happy because, it's a war, so I don't know how happy they were. But Iran has the satisfaction of saying, we struck at Israel, we fired off everything we had, we showed them a thing or two. Israel gets to say, yeah, and we defended our country. Nobody was, might have been 1 or 2 casualties, sadly, but effectively nobody was killed or injured. Nothing was damaged. Aren't we great at defense? And then there's no further escalation. And that was evidenced by the fact that when it was done, the Iranian ambassador to the United Nations issued a statement saying, we had to do this. Israel attacked us. We had a right of self-defense, in effect, to shoot back. But we consider the matter concluded. And that was a key phrase. It's, okay, they shot at us. We shot at them. Done. Unless they come back again with another attack, we'll get to that. This was done. And so Israel is now making noises about, well, we can't just sit there and shoot missiles at us. We're going to strike back at you. But boy, was it orchestrated. It was almost like a movie set where Iran agreed to do something that looked good to their people, but wasn't actually that threatening. Israel got to shoot them all down and not suffer that much damage. If Iran was serious, why weren't the missiles aimed at Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, for that matter? And the Biden administration comes out ahead because they avoided World War III at a time when they got enough on their plate with Ukraine. And the British helped, the Jordanians helped. I mean, everybody knew. I mean, other than, Americans probably, everybody in the Middle East knew this was happening. It played out exactly as orchestrated. And then as far as the White House is concerned, you say, well, gee, do we put this on a par with Henry Kissinger, James Baker, George Shultz in terms of diplomatic brilliance? I would say, no, they did orchestrate it, that's for sure. But it was all because of the election. It was all because the White House doesn't want another war. Well, we already have a war in Gaza, but it doesn't want a bigger war. It doesn't want a war with Iran at a time when they're trying to win the election. So it's a lot of kabuki. I mean, it was, got real missiles, real shoot downs, some damage, not much. I'm not making light of it, but I'm saying this thing was orchestrated from the get-go.
Could this lead to the U.S. intervention, U.S. anything over there in the Middle East? Could it lead us into some sort of war?
Well, it's possible, but it's certainly the last thing the White House wants for all the reasons we just went through. They did everything possible to orchestrate this. Okay, do what you got to do, but let's not escalate this. Could it get worse? Well, the answer is, of course, it could. The White House is going to do everything they can to make sure it doesn't. Iran doesn't want a war with Israel. Who would win? How that would play out? Those are big questions, but you can be sure that Iran's got their pretty full plate right now. They're selling a lot of oil to China. They're making a ton of money. They're working on the technology. With all that going on, they don't want a war. I mean, that would actually set back a lot of the progress I just described. Israel doesn't want a war with Iran because they got their hands full in Gaza. Israel's getting a lot of pushback from around the world. Why don't you wrap this up in Gaza? The civilian casualties are too great, etc. So Israel doesn't want a war with Iran because they've got a full plate. Iran doesn't want a war with Israel because a lot of things are going Iran's way right now. They're piling up a ton of money. They're making technological advances. They're selling drones to Russia. They're selling oil to China. And they're joining the BRICS. Things are really going well for Iran in a lot of respects. They don't want to mess that up. Neither side wants a war, and the White House certainly does not want a war because of the election, as I described. So my forecast would be this is not going to turn into a wider war, full-scale war between Israel and Iran, at least for the foreseeable future. It's not a 5-year forecast. Make it call it a 6-month forecast or 1-year forecast. It wouldn't take much to ignite it. Again, this is like a pile of dry kindling. It only takes one match to start a fire. Hopefully no one's lighting the match. I don't think they will for the near future. The potential's there, but I don't think it will turn into a wider war with the foreseeable future. China, no doubt, wants to be East Asia, Western Pacific, hegemonic power. They want to dominate the South China Sea. They want a lot of things. Eventually, they might want to take Taiwan. But again, they're not going to invade Taiwan in the next 6 months, maybe not the next 4 or 5 years. I'm not ruling it out longer term. That issue is not going away. They're confronting, Philippine work boats, or the Philippines are trying to do what South China has already done, which is take some reefs, basically, and dredge up the sea bottom, pile up a lot of sand, make it an island, build facilities on it. That's what the Chinese did. They created islands out of, if not quite thin air, just, like you said, dredged up sand from the bottom of the ocean. China's pushing back, sending Coast Guard vessels in, using water cannons as a weapon to douse these Philippine boats and make it impossible for them to do a lot. There's tension there, but again, nobody wants to see that escalate into a war, at least of all the Chinese. These things may turn into wars in the future. That may well be the case. But for now, again, China's got a full plate. China's economy is not doing well. China's economy is slowing down dramatically. Bad debts are piling up. Commercial real estate sectors imploding. Apple has already moved, not quite, but almost 15% of their iPhone production to India. U.S. businesses are not investing in China on the whole. They're looking at Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, even Kazakhstan, India, wherever. I mean, it all depends on whether you need natural resources or manufacturing capacity or technology or whatever your inputs are. But American business is already pivoting away from China towards South Asia and India. So China's got a lot of problems. And again, I don't think they want to dial up the geopolitical tension beyond what's kind of there in the background. Russia's different. They have no way of avoiding the war in Ukraine. That's way too far along. So as far as Russia's concerned, the gloves are off. They were bombing transformers and power grid components, but now they're actually bombing power stations. The electricity generating stations They're not stations, they're plants, large plants. They're destroying them. And so it's not a question of a temporary blackout and you got to fix the transformer or whatever. They wiped out their capacity to generate electricity. The Russians also blew up a very, very large natural gas storage facility. And what's interesting about that is that was a natural gas storage facility for all of Europe. And Russia just blew it up. So now you could be looking at natural gas shortages in Europe. Their power grid or electric generating capacity has been to a great extent destroyed by the Russians. So the gloves are off.
What does this look like for the markets, for the oil market, gold market? What are you seeing there? What could happen in the next few months?
Great question, Matt. What's interesting is that the oil market was going up and the gold market was going up before all this happened. Might have been a little bit of response to Ukraine, but gold was going up for other reasons. In fact, it didn't go up at all because of what happened in Iran and Israel over the weekend. But if you'd taken the pulse on Saturday afternoon, a reasonable person might have said, oh, gold's gone straight to $3,000 an ounce and oil's gone straight to $100 a barrel. That's it. This is it. The Middle East is blowing up. Give me some gold and they're going to close the Straits of Hormuz, et cetera, et cetera. That didn't happen. The price of oil was down a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit. Price of gold down a little bit, not a lot, but we didn't get those big spikes because whether people internalized the fact that this whole thing was orchestrated, which we just explained at the beginning of the interview, quite apart from that, even if you didn't know that, but you just said, well, looks like things have come down a little bit. Yeah. And what we're seeing today is maybe even a bit of a rally. What's called a relief rally, which we thought it was going to get a lot worse and it didn't. So buy stocks. Sometimes that's the psychology of Wall Street. So short run, gold is going to continue to go up and oil is going to continue to go up, but not for reasons specifically related to this Iran, launching missiles on Israel. It has to do with more fundamental reasons. Saudi Arabia and Russia have reduced supply. There's geopolitical concerns with gold. I would say we're calling it the everything hedge. Everyone says, oh, get me some gold to hedge inflation. Well, if you have a lot of inflation, gold will go up and it'll preserve wealth. It does perform that role, but that's not the driver right now. We have some inflation, not a lot. The driver right now is just geopolitical uncertainty across the board. What's going on in Ukraine? What's going on in China? What's going on in Israel and Iran? What's going on with the price of oil? What's happening with the economy? We could spend hours on those 4 questions I just asked, but the point is, from an investor's point of view, there's just way too much uncertainty in the air. And it's not just, I don't know what's going to happen to the economy in the next 6 months. It's much bigger than that, where you have to ask yourself, is there going to be an invasion of Taiwan? Are the Russians going to, roll over Ukraine? Is there going to be a bigger war in the Middle East? Is there going to be a nuclear war? These questions, which used to be really a stretch, let's say, are front and center. Doesn't mean they're all going to happen. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the fact that people are trying to figure it out at all says get some gold. And the other driver, which I don't think is getting enough attention, or if it is, people don't understand it, there's a move, and it may come to a head in a matter of days, not months, but days or weeks at the most, which is Russia bought approximately $300 billion of U.S. Treasury securities with dollars. They earned dollars selling oil. They took the dollars to invest them in U.S. Treasury securities as part of their reserve position, and the amount is approximately $300 billion. The U.S. and the Europeans are talking about stealing that money. They've already frozen it. That money, those securities were frozen right after the war began in February 2022. But freezing doesn't mean stealing. Freezing means, okay, they're still yours. They belong to Russia, but you can't have them back. You can't collect the interest. You can't pledge them. You can't get principal maturity. They're yours, but you can't do anything with them. That's freezing. Seizing is different. Seizing is when you steal them, basically. And that's what's being talked about now. And, there's the U.S. Senate is demanding $61 billion for Ukraine. The House conservatives, Republicans are pushing back on that. But what Speaker Mike Johnson might do is say, okay, Ukraine, you can have $61 billion, but we're going to take it from Russia. We're going to steal it from Russia. Or maybe we'll borrow the money and secure the loan with a pledge of the securities. And when Ukraine defaults, which they inevitably will, the creditor can take the securities as collateral. I mean, there are a lot of Mickey Mouse structuring issues around this, but they all boil down to the same thing, which is stealing the Russian money. Now, just kind of putting that to one side, that's playing out, I think would be an enormous blunder, a world historic blunder on the part of the United States to do that. But they're heading that direction. But look at the rest of the world. Think about China, Taiwan, South Korea, India, Saudi Arabia, et cetera, a lot of other countries, Brazil, who have tens or hundreds of billions or even upwards of $1 trillion of U.S. Treasury securities. I should put Japan on the list. When you watch the United States steal the U.S. Treasuries from Russia, how comfortable do you feel holding U.S. Treasuries in your reserve position? Can you comfortably say, oh, the U.S. will never steal them? How do you know? What if you do something that the U.S. doesn't like and they say, well, we did it to Russia, we'll do it to you. So then you look around and say, well, where else can I put my dollars? Because they earn dollars through exports or et cetera. Where else can I put my dollars? Well, do you like Italian bonds, German bonds, Japanese bonds? Better, if U.S. Treasuries aren't secure, if the U.S. doesn't follow the rule of law, if for that matter, the Europeans participate in stealing the Russian securities, which they would have to because most of them are actually in Europe at European custodians, why would you feel any more comfortable with German, Italian, or Japanese bonds? I think the answer is you wouldn't. So where else do you go? Gold. I'm not making a gold bug argument. I'm not saying we're going back to a gold standard. I'm just saying if the U.S. steals the Russian assets consisting of U.S. Treasury securities, and you're not comfortable being in sovereign securities, the only place you can go is gold. That's what's driving the price, because the Americans are too dumb to understand that. I did some calculations the other day. It was kind of interesting. So the U.S. is talking about stealing the $300 billion of U.S. Treasury securities owned by Russia. And sometimes they say, well, we'll just take $6 billion, we'll take the interest, whatever it is, it's theft. But they haven't actually done it yet. Meanwhile, Russia's gold reserves, Russia has 25% of the reserves in gold today. They've been in that position for a while. The value of their gold went up by $50 billion. When gold went from $1,800 an ounce, where it was a couple of months ago, to about just under $2,400 an ounce, which is where it is today, that delta, that change of $600 per ounce times the number of ounces, and there are 34,000 troy ounces in a metric ton approximately. Russia has 3,000 metric tons. But when you do the math, the number is about $50 billion. So just by talking about stealing the securities, the United States has enriched Russia by $50 billion because they've created a gold bull market. Russia owns gold. It just shows you how dumb U.S. policymakers are. But Russia right now is counting their winnings because, as I say, they just made $50 billion on their gold holdings.